Autism sprinter, think equity, yeah. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, yeah, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with autism sprinter. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with autism sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. Yes, it gotta be equal. It gotta be right.
Hey guys, how are you? Good evening. Thank you for taking your Thursday night and joining us and watching us while we speak on a conversation, just kind of like what I was telling Zuleny. It's a conversation that I feel like we don't have enough in the disability community. As many of you guys know, it is Pride Month. And we this conversation is missing. Literally missing out of the whole equation in our disability community. And after meeting Zuleny on a last live that she had joined us to talk about having autism as an adult and having individuals with autism lead these conversations, because again, parents like me are kind of always the ones that are navigating these conversations. We're the ones that are always speaking up for our children, not knowing that some of our children who are verbal and who have the ability to speak up for themselves, we're often not bringing them to the forefront to lead the conversation. So when I met Zuleny, I was like, girl, we got to have you back. And, Zuleny was very interested in talking about the sexuality piece. So without further introduction, I want to introduce Zuleny, and let's get into disability in the queer community. And I want you guys to know that Zuleny created this theme. So this is her space, her voice, and she's going to be leading this conversation. And I'm just going to be nosy mom, and I'm just going to be asking questions, being who I am. What's up, girl? Well, what's up, Zuleny? How are you?
Good.
So I do this all the time because I'm still learning the pronouns. To start this conversation, how do we, the community watching, how do we identify you? He, she, they, them, you have it on your display. How do we identify you?
Well, I identify as they, them, but she is okay sometimes, but not like all the time.
Okay.
They is like my top number one thing I like to have.
And I like that. So can you tell us, first of all, Zuleny, can you tell us a little bit about you? And why this conversation is super important for us to have in the disability community, and why others who are non-disabled need to know about this component that's missing out of the disability space.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question again?
No, not a problem. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And can you tell us why this conversation is needed in the disability community?
I feel like it's important because like disabled people don't really talk about this. We don't really we're not really known to be like the people, oh yeah, let me question my gender identity and sexual orientation. We don't get to think about that because we're over here and people just think we're not like everybody else. We don't have sex, we don't do none of those stuff. And I'm like, we just do it differently, We have times where we're just we don't want to think about it probably, and then there are times where we do think about it. So it kind of sucks that we're like in this place where we're like not able to be free and figure out who we are as a person, because we already have to like basically come out as like disabled and pretty much tell the whole world like, hey, this is my disability. The ones, especially the ones like you can't see. So like it's now you already have all these other identities pile up on you, and you're like, oh crap, I knew there was something else going on. So I'm like, this is interesting.
And then, and you post a lot, and I follow a lot of your posts, and your posts are really like right on the money. The autism community itself is already a marginalized group, right? A community, a group that there's it's a large spectrum, and I feel like people don't truly understand autism, right? There's the nonverbal autism community, then there's a verbal autism community, and then there's the individuals who are in the middle. The spectrum is super wide. So again, you're already part of a marginalized group. How does it feel to be not only part of a marginalized group within disability, but being disabled and identifying your sexuality differently in a space that people don't even talk about it, right? Like, you feel that you are accepted in the queer community as someone who has autism?
I mean, the queer community is not that great when it comes to disabled people. So definitely, like, they're not really great when you have an invisible disability like autism or ADHD, because like they're kind of just like, wait, what? I gotta do this because this, and I'm like, yeah, like we already are the number one people who are like the big time marginalized. There's a lot of us, and like, and then there's a whole bunch of us who identify with being LGBT, and then we kind of just get forgotten. And that goes into play where it's either like stuff accessibility wise, and like making sure that they have a space for me if I need to like take a break or something. Like, they don't know how to do that. So I'm like, how y'all not know how to do that? I'm like, when I'm in other spaces with other like disabled people, like they know how to do it because they're used to it, right? So you would think that it's 2021 and they would already have it downplay, like, okay, yeah, this is important because we actually have lives too. We don't just stay in the house, or like, we're not like the typical like stereotype where in the house all the time.
Wow. I didn't even think about it like that, because and it's so funny because the other day I was talking to a mommy friend, and I was telling a mommy friend that sometimes I feel bad because I have twins, right? And one of my sons is on the spectrum, and the other one has ADHD. But he can do his own thing. Like, he doesn't need a lot of supports. Doesn't need a lot of accommodations. He just has a lot of energy. You know what I mean? And I was telling a friend that sometimes I feel bad that I kind of drag my other twin along with whenever his brother needs services and we need therapies. And so it's interesting that you're talking about the part of, listen, I'm not a disabled person who's in therapies all day. I have a life. I go to work. I go out to eat. I hang out with friends. I'm within a community, and I'm working on a community that they got to learn how to do accommodations from people like me. So can you expand a little bit of what you think what would accommodations look like in this community?
I know, like, I feel like a lot of it would be, how do I say it? Like, it would probably have to be like having like that quiet space, or like that type of room where you're able to just do whatever. And like and sometimes they don't even have that. I think the first time, what was it, last year or the year before, I did an event where it was full of trans people. And a lot of people don't really realize that like autism is like big time in the trans community. So like when you see that, and then when I was able myself to make that room for them, they're like, oh shoot, this wasn't there before. This is cool that it's here for me to just do whatever I want to do, or like not really be involved in like the workshops or whatever, but like even just in that room, that itself, that's like magic. You go in there, you do whatever you want to do, and then if you want to, you can go back to the workshop if you feel like it. Because a lot of the times, a lot of things are repetitive. So like if you're a trans person that's always been to this organization and this event, then like you don't always have to go there, even though it's good. Like how do I say it? It's like it's good information, but if
And
you're
how
the
many
type of
times you
person,
gonna repeat it? Keep it real.
yeah,
How many times you gonna repeat it?
yeah, it's like the same thing when I'm in like the disability spaces. Like they like to repeat a lot of the same stuff. I'm like, I already know how to do XYZ. Like I don't. I mean, it's nice to get a freshen up, but it's like the same thing. It becomes too much, and it just becomes like boring. So like but it's nice that they have that space, that we're able to have that space to just do whatever we want, and then we can come back and regroup and do what we were doing that day for the event.
I mean, that makes sense though, because a lot of people, and I'm a parent, and honestly, I don't even know how many more special education, trainings I have to go to, that I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I'm kind of like, the system's still broken.
Mm-hmm.
It violates the student special education rights. Many kids don't even get their services. So we're regurgitating the same information, but nothing's changing. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, especially in that space. So I could truly like understand the whole, like, how many times you're gonna say,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we move past having this big conversation and really creating a space that is led by the LGBT community, and it's ran and operated by the LGBT community, and then expanding on people who have, visible or not visible disabilities. Um, because I hear a lot about people and are in the disability community, are in the LGBT community, that sometimes don't feel accepted in that community. Because again, accommodations. Like, what do you say? What do you think? Do you think the LGBT community is fully um, able to support an array of disabilities in this space?
Mm, not fully, no. I mean, they have gotten better, but I do think that they still need more work than like the disabled community, because the disability community is already up top of like making sure what pronouns are, and like the LGBT community is like trying to figure out how do I be accessible, and they can't even do that, so they don't even know how to. And now already the disability community is like, oh yeah, pronouns, I know what that is.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm still learning. I go to meetings and people are always like, oh, on your Zoom, please identify your pronouns. And I'm like, okay, I'm just a mom and I'm still learning. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what be going on. I mean, like, so I'm learning, and I'm noticing that it is a big discussion, right? And I like to be a parent to learn, and making sure that I'm inclusive, and not feeling like I'm not listening to my children or their peers. So for parents like me who may not be fully aware that sexuality is a thing in the disability community, whether we want to admit it as parents or not, and if we're ready to have this conversation or not, what do you say to parents like myself who are still a little clueless that there is a conversation in sexuality in the disability community? What advice can you give a parent like myself who completely unaware of this?
Hmm. I feel like it should just be like just like how you treat your kids without disabilities. Just be like, oh shoot, you are gonna have sex. Okay, here's this condom.
Exactly.
Here's this condom. Here's something that you need. Or do you need to talk about your gender identity or your sexual orientation and just talk about it? Be like acceptable. Like don't be like kind of just like, I don't
Dismiss.
know how I feel about it. Because then you're gonna be like, well, are you like old enough to think about it? Yeah, I would think. If I thought about it when I was like a little kid, you would think I would think about it even today.
Just saying. I mean, we watch enough movies with a lot of like dicey little things, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
like
Whoa.
I just feel it just feels bad when like we're not exposed to like the general just stuff with other what everybody else is exposed to. Like it just doesn't make any sense to like put us in a little box and sort of baby us and act like, oh yeah, you're just not gonna be that way. And I'm like, too late.
Like, who are you to? And that's interesting you say that because I literally been having this conversation with my friends, my mommy friends, and I'm like, man, like sometimes I feel like I'm like too much of a helicopter mom with my son, right? And I think that a lot of it is that I know he has this label.
Mm,
And in my head, sometimes I feel like he may not be able to do things, but that's just my feelings. Those are my thoughts because, like you said, I'm putting him in this box based on this disability, right? So I appreciate that because I lately I've been feeling like, okay, mommy, you need to like fall back a little bit, like
mm.
chill because we're gonna be 12 this year, so things are gonna be looking a little, some feelings are gonna be coming in places that I might not be ready to talk about,
Yeah.
and so you know how do I have this conversation with my son about his sexuality and like do we leave it up to the schools to have conversations about sex? Do we leave it to providers to have the conversations about sex and teaching people how to put on condoms and contraceptives and if individuals want to go through a sexuality change or I don't even know if I'm using the right term, so help me here. um what can what can we do as parents to making sure that, like you said, we do not put your individuality, your sexuality in the box because we're a little old school. We may have some religion preferences, right? And we also don't want the world, because this world can be very cruel, to hurt you in a way that we wouldn't want you as our loved one to be hurt. Like, what
Mhm.
can we do to work out these thoughts and these feelings to ensure that our babies in the autism community can really truly express themselves in their sexuality?
I feel like you gotta like just sort of be open to have that conversation and just be ready because like there's like I don't want to be like technical, but there is data out there that's like, there's a lot of trans people on the autistic spectrum. And like, I feel like when you don't really like give that time for your child to just figure their self out, I just feel like they won't ever like they'll just grow up and they'll just be like, I couldn't do this because I couldn't wear this, or I couldn't wear a skirt one day because my parents said no because it's not what they think I should wear. And I'm just like, it's a skirt though. It doesn't really have like a thing. You just put it on your body. That's it. Like, that's
Clothes,
how I see it. It's just
clothes.
clothes. Yeah. And I feel like lately, like, this whole world becomes very like binary when it comes to like gender. So like just having to be able to like be patient and like do what you have to do, like, it's just kind of like that's all you got to do. You just kind of have to be patient and talk to them and have that conversation with them, whether it's like learning how to have sex or learning about, are you thinking about your gender identity or sexual orientation, like, and then how do you go from that? Like, how do you make sure that they're staying protective and making sure that they have like a support system, not just at home, but at school as well? Because, GSA, my GSA at my high school was like the greatest. And that was like the one thing that made me, finally realize to like come out after high school, or at least with my gender identity. Everything else, I was able to be myself because my mom was able to, help me through the way and just support me and not put me in a little space and make me feel like I can't do certain things because like I'm just like everybody else. I do what I have to do. I pay the bills or whatever I have to do. Like, I'm just a regular human being.
That's
And then I just have all these extra stuff that doesn't need to be so much for me. Like, let me just do whatever I want to do.
right. It kind of feels like everybody makes it a big deal besides the people who are going through who are, who want to live a free life, right? So I appreciate that you say that because I can honestly agree, feel like that sometimes we as human beings, we do make a big deal of things that don't necessarily need to be made a big deal.
Mhm.
If we're willing to communicate effectively to say, listen, life is life. Everyone's sexuality is different. We have to accept it. And how do we work on it, even if it is through our differences? You know what I mean? Even though if we think different, we may have religion beliefs or whatever the case may be. So I mean, I really appreciate this because I know that a lot of parents are probably watching, and many parents will say, I can probably see, because even in my head, I have these questions like, do parents look out for certain little things or certain behaviors, you know, to say, okay, maybe me and my child should be having a conversation about sexuality? Is there anything that you did as a child that made your mom say, hey, Suli, let's talk? It seems like, or were you kind of came out and say, hey, mom, this is what it is. You're going to deal with it, and we just going to have to figure it out, right? Um, what did she notice anything or behaviors that made her think anything when you finally came out?
Probably like around middle school, but like also like my me and her are a part of the LGBT community, so she was already okay with the fact that I just do whatever I want. Back then, obviously, I did identify as a cis woman, but like back then, I was just kind of trying to figure out where am I supposed to fit in. So I think she was being a mom and she was making sure, that I had all the stuff that I needed. And I feel like there were times, yeah, we struggled, but it wasn't bad enough that she wouldn't let me do whatever I thought was good for me. And she was able to, let me spread my little wings, obviously, and, basically be the person that I want to be and not be afraid to like be this person that I am today. So, like I feel like as parents should probably be like my mom and like, just be open the fact that, this is gonna be your child. Once this child is born, you don't know if there's gonna be the same gender by the time they grow old enough where they're able to like speak in a way that that you can understand them. So I just feel like just be open. Don't really put your child in a box where they have to only be straight or only be like cisgender, you know. Like I just feel like you have to be open to the fact that like this stuff is gonna happen, and like, and if it doesn't happen, that's great, you know, cool, whatever. But you know, it's still cool and whatever when it does happen.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a family makeup is not defined by what other people want to make up your family. It doesn't have
Hmm.
to be a mom and a dad. You know what I mean? It could be two moms. It could be two dads. Like it doesn't matter. You know what matters is that a child feels love and have the ability, like yourself, to come out and feel accepted within your household. Because you know when I follow a lot of these trends, you know, I see that a lot of youth feel uncomfortable coming out to parents who may have, again, you know, religion beliefs, or some parents who are totally, oh no, not my child, like
Hmm.
I brought you up, and you know, and then the whole guilt of feeling, you know, of feeling like, you know, and this one that always bothers me, you know, where oftentimes a lot of people, a lot of parents will self blame and say that something happened to my child while my child was being under the care of somebody. You know what I mean? Like people start having a lot of these thoughts. Um, they kind of convolute, get very convoluted, and you know, so I appreciate this conversation because again, for me, I I don't know. I'm about to have middle schoolers, and I know that sooner or later we're gonna have to have the conversation about sexuality. I'm not sure if I'm ready for it, to be honest with you. Um, you know, because I'm already like, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? And they're
Yeah.
looking at me like, mom, and I'm like, I just
Yeah.
want to like, you know, I just want to have this conversation and you kind of like start the path of, you know, making it okay for them to talk to me about whatever it is or whatever feelings they're having through their body, you know, and unpack that. Um, because I think that, you know, I don't know if you can expand on this, but do you feel that because you have autism, that people think that you do not have the ability to feel and think about things that any other person would think about?
All the time, yeah.
Mm.
All the time. People just automatically think like we don't really have like I just don't understand like how we just they don't think of us as like a person. They think of us as like a thing. Like we're
Mhm.
kind of like we're broken. We're not like uh what is it? Like straight, kind of just like the typical person. And I'm just like, I mean, is anybody a typical person? I don't think so. So it just really irks me where we're like people with like autism and or just people with disabilities, like we're just kind of like we're not really we're they don't really teach us about anything, whether we're in school or like in those little like stuff, because of like our accommodations or whatever. Like they don't really teach us anything, so then you're kind of just like, okay, I guess I'm just like everybody else. I'm just this, and then I just have to do that. Like, you don't really know because you wasn't really not like exposed to it, but like just thinking about it, like, oh, am I? And then when you realize, it feels good after you like come out and everything. I think yeah, there's gonna be some downfall. Like some people are gonna like either not be there, but like the ones that are still there are the ones that are always gonna be there. So like even if like even if it's like your kid who's still in middle school is kind of tricky, you know. Sometimes they don't want to say everything, so but sometimes they say it in their own way, and then the parent has to like sort of figure out like, oh, is that what you meant? So like, you know, it's all about patience, because like even though like in my opinion, I feel like sex should be taught in middle school, because that's where everybody is thinking about everything.
Well,
That's where all the hormones are all over the place and people
okay,
just
out
think
of whack.
about it. So, you know, and like there's nobody in the world that at least thought about it at least once. And even if they don't act on it, and even if they don't are not interested in it, they at least think about it. And if they don't, that's okay too. You know, you ain't gotta think about it, but make sure you know that the person that you're around or whatever, and if they do think about it, making sure that they're open to it, and that you're able to like, talk to talk to anybody that's like comfortable with like all of those conversations. You don't want to talk to somebody that is not comfortable, because then you're just kind of like, well, then why am I here, you know? And you just want to make sure that you have that community, because even if you bring it out to your loved ones, not everybody in your family is going to be accepting. So you have to find other people in your life that's going to accept you. Um, yeah, just being open. And even if you start now, that's cool. If you start later, that's even cool too. There's no like starting point on where to start. There's no start of like figuring out your identity or talking to your people about what you're confused about. Like, I think when I was learning about sex and everything, I was like, what is that? It's like, what's that? I don't remember that. I know what this was, but I didn't know I could do this, or I didn't know that was a thing. I just feel like we ain't taught of it, because we don't. I feel like, us disabled people with autism, we're not seen as like sexual beings. So, like, you gotta like take that out of your head, because we can't be sexual beings. We just gonna do it differently, and you just have to take time with us, like, and we're not always gonna be the typical straight cisgender person. Like, there's gonna be trans people, there's going to be non-binary people. Like, you gotta be open to those conversations, and be open to the fact that, like, yeah, this is me.
It's real. That's it. It's real. Sexuality and the disabilities is real. It's that simple. So I appreciate you. I'm here to let you want to come back on and have another conversation about something that needs to come out. Because a lot of what we do is centered around parents. Because I need parents to not be scared, and I need us parents to kind of like fall back a little bit, let our children lead the way if they have the ability to lead the way. Because our children are human beings and they're individuals too. And at the end of the day, I may not be around forever. I know I'm not going to be around forever. And I don't want to enter my children because of my own biases. So I appreciate that. I don't know if there's one last thing you want to close us out with. Um, you know, well, you can close us out with, how do you celebrate Pride Month? I know it's a corny question, but I want to ask, how do you celebrate Pride Month within your community?
Well, I mostly, honestly, I'm gonna be real. I only hang out with my mother, and then maybe a few of my friends and a sister. But like, I think the way that I actually celebrate Pride is probably through my outfits. My outfits could be a little bit out there, and people are just like, "What is that?" I'm like, this is what it is. Like, this is what it looks like. So anytime, and sometimes it don't even have to be rainbow. It could just be like something that's like magical, or like fairy type, or whatever it is. And I feel like that defines me as like me being a part of the community. So that's how I usually celebrated the whole month. This month has been really tricky, because we're getting back to normal, and like we're not like in COVID anymore. So, well, that's what the world is saying. But like, I just, now I'm trying to go back in routine, and try to celebrate as me with my outfits, and my people, as much as possible. And I know, like, we kind of like, some people I know don't really like to celebrate Pride Month, because Pride has been very like with corporations and everything. That's another thing, that's like a separate conversation. But I know a lot of people make their own pride in like their own household, where however they want to make it, and as much as accessible as they want to too.
Ooh, I want to talk about that soon, because I've been noticing that there's like a shift happening.
Oh
Because
yeah.
listen, I'm nosy. So I'm noticing there's a shift and how people within the pride community and the LGBTQ community are associating themselves with certain organizations. I'm noticing a little bit of that, and I would love for you to come back and talk to us about that, because I think that that's something that we can kind of talk about with autism and certain organizations as well. That there's a disconnect that a lot of people don't know is true. And again, is that we forget that individuals like you have a voice, and your voice should be leading the conversation, not me. You know what I mean? Because I'm not the one with the lived experience. I'm just a parent, right? So I appreciate that. So, Zuleny, I love you, babes. I appreciate you. Check your email by tonight. I'm gonna send you a little something on behalf of Autism Sprinter, because we really appreciate your time. And up whenever you're ready for the next conference.
Definitely, yeah.
All right. Good night, my love.
Bye.
All right, guys. So, Suli's amazing. And, as a parent, it's an honor to be open and have open conversations that, truth be told, that me growing up in a Latino household and a mom who's very religious wasn't, this conversation wasn't something that we had at dinner. And I think it's a conversation that we still struggle with in my household. So, and in my family. And I think that, it's interesting to see what I go through, or what I grew up with around this conversation with in religion, and and still seeing that we're still a little delay in this conversation in the disability community, as well as the communities of color. The BIPOC community, and so many of these language changes that I'm trying as a founder of Autism Sprinter to kind of still learn and be inclusive and be adaptive to a lot of these changes, because there's a lot to keep up with. So, again, we are super excited to have Zuleny here. I told Zuleny I'm gonna shorten your name up, because that's what I do. But it's exciting, and it was powerful again to hear from someone who has a disability, to discuss what it feels like to be someone who's on the autism spectrum and also in the queer community. And we look forward to kind of expanding on this conversation, and we hope that other nonprofits throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to start having these conversations to really, dive into the LGBT community within another marginalized community of disability community. So again, guys, I appreciate it. You guys have a good night. I will be downloading this, and it will be up on YouTube, hopefully by tomorrow. So you can catch it on YouTube, and you can also catch the replay. But again, you guys have a good night. We appreciate you. See you next time.
Autism Sprinter. Think equity. Yeah. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, yeah, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. Yes, it gotta be equal. It gotta be right.